Hello again, everybody. More Moby Dick. Chapter 12, biographical. More coffee. More scone. It's looking good. Looking nice. Look at that. Gorgeous. Right. Chapter 12, biographical. Just a short chapter again. Just a couple of pages till we get into... We'll see. Queequeg was a native of Rokovoko. Queequeg was a native of Rokovoko, an island far away to the west and south. It is not down on any map. True places never are. When a new hatched savage running wild about his native woodlands is in a grass clout, followed by the nimbling goats as if you were a green sapling, even then in Queequeg's ambitious soul lurked a strong desire to see something more of Christendom than a specimen whaler or two. His father was a high chief, king, his uncle a high priest, and on the maternal side he boasted aunts who were the wives of unconquerable warriors. There was excellent blood in his veins, royal stuff, though sadly vitiated, I say, by the cannibal propensity he nourished in his untutored youth. A Sag Harbour ship visited his father's bay, and Queequeg sought a passage to Christian lands, but the ship, having a full complement of seamen, spurned his suit, and not all the king and his father's influence could prevail. But Queequeg vowed a vow. Alone in his canoe, he paddled off to a distant strait which he knew the ship must pass through when she quitted the island. On one side was a coral reef, on the other a low tongue of land covered with mangrove thickets that grew out into the water. Hiding his canoe, still afloat, among these thickets with its prow seaward, he sat down in the stern, paddle low in his hand, and when the ship was gliding by, like a flash he darted out, gained her side, with one backward dash of his foot, capsized and sank his canoe, climbed up the chains, and throwing himself at full length upon the deck, grappled a ringbolt there, and swore not to let it go, though hacked in pieces. That's impressive. He's impressive, eh? Let's have a bit of scone. Come on, I can't resist scone. I like the top bit, which I'll eat in a second. In vain, the captain threatened to throw him overboard, suspended a cutlass over his naked wrists. Queequeg was the son of a king, and Queequeg budged not. Struck by his desperate dauntlessness and the wild desire to visit Christendom, the captain at last relented and told him that he might make himself at home. This young savage, this sea prince of Wales, never saw the captain's cabin. They put him down among the sailors and made a whaleman of him. But like Tsar Peter, content to toil in the shipyards of foreign cities, Queequeg disdained no seeming ignominy, if thereby he might happily gain the power of enlightening his untutored countrymen. For at bottom, so he told me, he was actuated my profound desire to learn among the Christians the arts whereby to make his people still happier than they were, and more than that, still better than they were. But alas, the practices of whalemen soon convinced him that even Christians could be both miserable and wicked, infinitely more so than all his father's heathens. Arrived at last in old Sag Harbour, and seeing what sailors did there, and then going on to Nantucket and seeing how they spent their wages in that place also, poor Queequeg gave it up for lost. Thought he, it's a wicked world in all its meridians. I'll die a pagan. And thus, an old idolater at heart, he yet lived among these Christians, wore their clothes, and tried to talk their gibberish. Hence their queer ways about him, though now some time from home. I think we're seeing more and more sympathy for Queequeg, aren't we? I like that. By hints, I asked him whether he did not propose going back and having a coronation, since he might now consider his father dead and gone. he being very old and feeble at the last accounts. He answered no, not yet, and added that he was fearful Christianity, or rather Christians, had unfitted him for ascending the pure and undefiled throne of 30 pagan kings before him. But by and by, he said, he would return, as soon as he felt himself baptized again. For the nonce, however, he proposed to sail about, and sow his wild oats in all 4 oceans. They had made a harpooner of him, and that barbed iron was in lieu of a sceptre now. I asked him what might be his immediate purpose, touching upon his free movements. He answered to go to sea again in his old vocation. Upon this I told him that whaling was my own design, and informed him of my intention to sail out of Nantucket, as being the most promising port for an adventurous whaleman to embark from. He at once resolved to accompany me to that island, ship aboard the same vessel, get into the same watch, the same boat, the same mess with me, in short, to share my every hap, with both my hands in his, boldly dip into the potluck of both worlds. To all this I joyously assented, for besides the affection I now felt for Queequeg, he was an experienced harpooner, and as such could not fail to be of great usefulness to one who, like thee, was wholly ignorant of the mysteries of whaling, though well acquainted with the sea as known to a merchant seaman. His story being ended with his pipe's last dying puff, Queequeg embraced me, pressed his forehead against mine, and blowing out the light, we rolled over each other, this way and that, and very soon were sleeping. End of chapter. It's getting a bit busier downstairs, isn't it? So hopefully you can still hear me properly. Chapter 13, Wheelbarrow. Next morning, Monday, after disposing of the embalmed head to a barber for a block, I settled my own and comrade's bill, using, however, my comrade's money. The grinning landlord, as well as the boarders, seemed amazingly tickled at the sudden friendship which had sprung up between me and Queequeg, especially as Peter Coffin's cock and bull stories about him had previously so much alarmed me concerning the very person with whom I now companied with. We borrowed a wheelbarrow, and embarking our things, including my own poor carpet bag and Queequeg's canvas sack and hammock, we went away down to the Moss, the little Nantucket packet schooner moored at the wharf. As we were going along, the people stared, not at Queequeg so much, for they were used to seeing cannibals like him in the streets, but at seeing him and me upon such confidential terms. But we heeded them not, going along wheeling the barrow by turns, and Queequeg now and then stopping to adjust the sheath on his harpoon barbs. I asked him why he carried such a troublesome thing with him ashore, and whether all whaling ships did not find their own harpoons. To this, in substance, he replied that though what I hinted was true enough, yet he had a particular affection for his own harpoon, because it was of assured stuff. Well tried in many a mortal combat, and deeply intimate with the hearts of whales. In short, like many reapers and mowers who go into the farmers' meadows armed with their own scythes, though in no wise obliged to furnish them, even so Queequeg, for his own private reasons, preferred his own harpoon. Shifting the barrow from hand to hand, he told me a funny story about the first wheelbarrow he had ever seen. It was in Sag Harbour. The owners of his ship, it seems, had lent him one, and wished to carry the heavy chest to his boarding house. Not to seem ignorant about the thing, though in truth he was entirely so, concerning the precise way in which to manage the barrow, Queequeg put his chest upon it, lashes it fast, and then shoulders the barrow and marches up the wharf. "Why," said I, "Queequeg, you might have known better than that, one would think. Didn't the people laugh?" Upon this he told me another story. The people of his island of Rokovoko, it seems at their wedding feasts, express the fragrant water of young coconuts. It's hyphenated there, cocoa nuts, into a large stained calabash like a punch bowl, and this punch bowl always forms the great central ornament of the braided mat where the feast is held. Now, a certain grand merchant ship once touched at Rokovo, and its commander, from all accounts, a very stately, punctilious gentleman, at least for a sea captain, this commander was invited to the wedding feast of Queequeg's sister, a pretty young princess, just turned of 10. Well, when all the wedding guests were assembled at the bride's bamboo cottage, this captain marches in, and being assigned the post of honour, placed himself over against the punch bowl. And between the high priest and his majesty the king, Queequeg's father, grace being said, for those people have their grace as well as we, though Queequeg told me that unlike us, who at such times look downwards to our platters, they, on the contrary, copying the ducks, glance upwards to the great giver of all feasts. Grace, I see, being said by the high priest, opens the banquet by the immemorial ceremony of the island, that is, dipping his consecrated and consecrating fingers into the bowl before the blessed beverage circulates. Seeing him placed next to the priest, and noting the ceremony, and thinking himself, being captain of a ship, as having plain precedence over a mere island king, especially in the king's own house, the captain coolly proceeds to wash his hands in the punch bowl, taking it, I suppose, for a huge finger glass. "Thou," said Queequeg, "what do you think thou? Didn't our people laugh?" Let me have a bit more. I'm going to have to do an accent of some sort. I apologise. I know it's horribly racist, but I'm going to have to do an accent because it's written like that. Lovely scone. What's that squealing noise? Oh, coffee's starting to go cool. At last, passage paid and luggage safe, we stood on board the schooner. Hoisting sail, it glided down the Acushnet River. Acushnet? On one side, New Bedford rose in terraces of streets, their ice-covered trees all glittering in the clear, cold air. Huge hills and mountains of casks on casks were piled upon our wharves, and side by side the world-wandered whale ships lay silent and safely moored at last, while from others came a sound of carpenters and coopers, with blended noises of fires and forges to melt the pitch, all betokening that new cruises were on the start. That one most perilous and long voyage ended, only begins a second, and a second ended, only begins a third, and so on, forever and for aye. Such is the endlessness, yea, the intolerableness of all earthly effort. Gaining the more open water, the bracing breeze waxed fresh. The little Moss tossed the quick foam from her bows, as a young colt his snortings. How I snuffed that tartar air, how I spurned that turnpike earth, that common highway all over dented with the marks of slavish heels and hooves, and turned me to admire the magnanimity of the sea which will permit no records. At this same foam fountain, Queequeg seemed to drink and reel with me. His dusky nostrils swelled apart. He showed his filed and pointed teeth. On and on we flew, and our offing gained, the Moss did homage to the blast. Ducked and dived her bows as a slave before the Sultan, sideways leaning and sideways darted, every rope yarn tingling like a wire, the two tail masts buckling like Indian canes in land tornadoes. So full of this reeling scene were we, as we stood by the plunging bowsprit, that for some time we did not notice the jeering glances of the passengers, a lubber-like assembly, who marvelled that two fellow beings should be so companionable, as though a white man were anything more dignified than a whitewashed negro. But there were some boobies and bumpkins there who, by their intense greenness, must have come from the heart and centre of all verdure. Queequeg caught one of those young saplings mimicking him behind his back. I thought the bumpkin's hour of doom was come. Dropping his harpoon, the brawny savage caught him in his arms, and by an almost miraculous dexterity and strength, sent him high up bodily into the air, and then, slightly tapping his stern in mid-somerset, the fellow landed with bursting lungs upon his feet, while Queequeg, turning his back upon him, lighted his tomahawk pipe, and passed it to me for a puff. Captain! Captain! Yelled the bumpkin, running towards that officer. Captain! Captain! Here's the devil! Hello, you, sir, cried the captain, a gaunt rib of the sea, stalking up to Queequeg. What in thunder do you mean by that? Don't you know you might have killed that chap? What him say? Said Queequeg, as he mildly turned to me. He said I, that you came near killing that man there, pointing to the still shivering greenhorn. Killy? Cried Queequeg, twisting his tattooed face into an unearthly expression of disdain. Him bevy smally fishy. Queequeg no killy, so smally fishy. Queequeg killy big whale. Look you, roared the captain. I'll kill you, you cannibal, if you try any more of your tricks aboard here, so mind your eye. But it so happened just then that it was high time for the captain to mind his own eye. The prodigious strain of the mainsail had parted the weather sheet, and the tremendous boom was now flying from side to side, completely sweeping the entire after part of the deck. The poor fellow whom Queequeg had handled so roughly was swept overboard. All hands were in a panic, and to attempt snatching at the boom to stay it seemed madness. It flew from right to left and back again, almost in one ticking of a watch, and every instant on the point of snapping into splinters. Nothing was done, and nothing seemed capable of being done. Those on deck rushed towards the bows, and stood eyeing the boom as if it were the lower jaw of an exasperated whale. In the midst of this consternation, Queequeg dropped to his knees, and crawling under the path of the boom, whipped hold of a rope, secured one end of the bulwarks, and then flinging the other like a lasso, caught it round the boom as it swept over his head. And at the next jerk, the spar that was that way trapped, and all was safe. The schooner was running to the wind, and while the hands were clearing away the stern boat, Queequeg, stripped to the waist, darted from the side with a long, living arc of a leap. For 3 minutes or more he was seen swimming like a dog, throwing his long arms straight out before him, and by turns revealing his brawny shoulders through the freezing foam. I looked at the grand and glorious fellow, but saw no one to be saved. The greenhorn was gone down. Shooting himself perpendicularly from the water, Queequeg now took an instant's glance around him, and seeming to see just how matters were, dived down and disappeared. A few minutes more, he rose again, one arm still striking out, and with the other dragging a lifeless form. The boat soon picked them up. The poor bumpkin was restored. All hands voted Queequeg a noble trump. The captain begged his pardon. From that hour I clove to Queequeg like a barnacle, yea, till poor Queequeg took his last long dive. Was there ever such unconsciousness? I did not seem to think that he at all deserved a medal from the humane and magnanimous societies, yet only asked for water, fresh water, something to wipe the brine off. That done, he put on dry clothes, lighted his pipe, and leaning against the bulwarks, mildly eyeing those around him, seemed to be saying to himself, "It's a mutual joint stock world, in all meridians. We cannibals must help those Christians." I like that. End of chapter 13. That's really good. We're really liking Queequeg, aren't we? We're really liking him now. Amazing stuff. I was just picturing the boom swinging back and forth over the deck, and Queequeg throwing a rope around it and stopping it, and then diving into the sea. Brilliant. Right. As always, tap onto my face down there to subscribe to me. Feel free to comment as well, down below in the comment section, whatever you'd like to say. And I'll see you for the next chapter. Excuse me. The next chapter or two. I'll try the rest of my coffee before it goes cold. So we might be back in the Cloud House here next week. We might be somewhere else, who knows. But thank you for watching for the moment. and I'll see you next time. See you later, everybody. Bye.